One had thought, perhaps naively, that the spectacle of corporate America's boundless venality had reached something approaching a natural ceiling. The obscene bonuses paid to the architects of financial collapse, the golden parachutes awarded to executives who had piloted their companies into bankruptcy, the stock options lavished upon mediocrities who happened to occupy corner offices during bull markets, all of these had seemed to represent a kind of plateau in the landscape of organized theft. But no. Tesla's shareholders have just voted, with a majority of 75%, to award Elon Musk a compensation package potentially worth $1 trillion, a sum so grotesque, so utterly disconnected from any conceivable notion of merit or proportionality that it makes the robber barons of the Gilded Age look like practitioners of modest restraint. Let us be clear about what has transpired here. This is not, as the obfuscating language of corporate governance would have it, merely a performance-based incentive structure or a retention mechanism for key personnel. This is the granting of shares that could make one individual the world's first trillionaire, a figure that exceeds the GDP of all but a handful of nations, that represents more wealth than entire continents will generate in years, that could, if liquidated and redistributed, transform the material conditions of millions of human beings. And for what? For doing his job, for continuing to serve as CEO of a company he already substantially controls, at which he is already obscenely compensated, and from which he has already extracted wealth that would make Croesus blush. The apologists, and they are legion, for every mammon finds his profits, will protest that the compensation is contingent. Musk only receives the full package if Tesla reaches a market capitalization of $8.5 trillion, delivers 20 million vehicles, and deploys 1 million humanoid robots. How very admirable, how positively Herculean, except that, as has been quietly noted, Musk could collect tens of billions of dollars by hitting only a handful of the more modest intermediate targets. The structure of the arrangement ensures that even partial success, even mediocrity dressed up in the language of innovation, will enrich him beyond the dreams of avarice. It is rather like promising a pickpocket a percentage of the crown jewels if he can steal them all, but assuring him that he'll still get to keep the diamonds he manages to pilfer along the way. One might ask, and one certainly should ask, what manner of institutional investor, what species of fiduciary responsibility could possibly justify such a vote? Norway's sovereign wealth fund, which holds a stake in the company, voted against the package, citing concerns about the total size of the award, dilution, and lack of mitigation of key person risk. Here at least is a glimmer of sanity, a suggestion that somewhere in the machinery of global capital, a few individuals retain the capacity for elementary moral reasoning. The Norwegians understand what should be obvious to anyone not suffering from a severe case of stockholder syndrome, that tying a company's fate so completely to a single volatile personality, while simultaneously granting that personality a financial interest so vast as to dwarf the stakes of all other investors combined, is not governance, but idolatry. And what of this personality to whom such trust has been invested? Research from Yale University indicates that Musk's political activities contributed to Tesla losing as many as 1.2 million vehicle sales over a 3-year period, a rather steep price for shareholders to pay while their CEO throws fascist salutes at political rallies, a gesture so unmistakable in its historical resonance that even his most slavish defenders could only muster the pathetic excuse that he was merely awkward. His time and attention are divided among multiple companies, multiple vanity projects, and his primary occupation, serving as the world's wealthiest conduit for racist conspiracy theories, anti-Semitic bilge, and the kind of casual cruelty toward transgender people that would make a playground bully blush. He has threatened to pursue artificial intelligence and robotics ventures outside Tesla if not sufficiently incentivized, a form of corporate blackmail that would be beneath the dignity of a Teamster boss, though perhaps fitting for someone who has transformed a social media platform into a sewer where neo-Nazis flourish and basic human decency goes to die. One searches in vain for evidence of the visionary leadership that supposedly justifies this largesse, finding instead a man who has devoted his wealth and platform to rehabilitating fascism, mainstreaming white nationalism, and persecuting the vulnerable while his actual business hemorrhages value. That this contemptible demagogue, this apartheid-raised bully who mistakes cruelty for strength and bigotry for insight, should be rewarded with $1 trillion for destroying shareholder value and debasing public discourse. tells us everything we need to know about the moral bankruptcy of contemporary capitalism. The defenders will invoke the creation of shareholder value, that most elastic and convenient of justifications. Tesla's stock has risen, therefore Musk deserves his tribute. This is the logic of the casino, not of productive enterprise. It confuses luck with skill, timing with genius, and the inflation of asset bubbles with the creation of actual wealth. Musk's 2018 pay package, initially valued at $2.6 billion, is now worth over $100 billion due to stock price appreciation, a windfall owing far more to monetary policy, market sentiment, and the madness of crowds than to any individual's merit. And now we are to repeat the exercise, but at an order of magnitude that beggars comprehension. There is something obscene, and I use that word with precision, in the spectacle of such concentrated wealth being awarded while the company's workers labor for wages, while cities crumble for lack of infrastructure investment, while children go hungry and sick for want of resources that represent a rounding error in this package. The free market fundamentalists will protest that this is simply the operation of supply and demand, that Musk's unique talents command a unique price. But this is not a market transaction. It is a transfer of wealth from the many to the one, enabled by a structure of corporate governance that makes a mockery of the very concept of accountability. For comparison, NVIDIA's CEO, widely regarded as pivotal to his company's success in the AI boom, is paid $50 million per year and owns 3.5% of a company worth nearly $5 trillion. Somehow, this arrangement has not prevented NVIDIA from becoming the most valuable company on Earth. The shareholder vote itself deserves examination. The package passed with support from retail investors whose judgment has been shaped by a cult of personality, carefully cultivated through social media, by the conflation of technological achievement with personal virtue, by the worship of wealth as evidence of superiority. One does not negotiate with a messiah. One submits, one believes, one opens the treasury and asks only where to sign. What has been approved would allow Musk to potentially surpass John D. Rockefeller's inflation-adjusted peak wealth of $630 billion, though one must note that Rockefeller's fortune, when measured as a share of the total economy rather than mere purchasing power, represented an even more staggering concentration of wealth. One struggles to find historical parallels for such concentrated economic power. The pharaohs, perhaps, who at least had the excuse of believing themselves divine. The Roman emperors, who controlled the surplus of an empire through military conquest rather than stock options. Even they would have found it difficult to justify a single individual commanding resources equivalent to the annual output of nations. The vote took place this week, and Musk celebrated by dancing on stage with a pair of robots, promising that these mechanical servants would eliminate poverty and provide everyone amazing medical care. One hardly knows where to begin with such claims. Perhaps with the observation that poverty has causes, inequality, lack of access to resources, structures of exploitation that cannot be solved by the further enrichment of billionaires, or with the bitter irony that the man promising universal healthcare has just been awarded a sum that could fund Medicare expansion for years, or with the simple factual question, if his previous hundreds of billions have not eliminated poverty, what makes anyone believe the next trillion will do the trick? What we are witnessing is not meritocracy, but its opposite, a system so thoroughly corrupted by the concentration of wealth that it has lost the capacity to distinguish between value creation and value extraction, between leadership and self-dealing, between the common good and private aggrandizement. The shareholders of Tesla have not made a business decision. They have made a theological one, an act of faith in the salvific power of genius unrestrained by accountability or proportion. History will not look kindly on this moment. When our descendants, should we leave them a habitable planet, examine the records of our age, they will struggle to understand how a society that styled itself advanced and democratic could have countenanced such obscene disparities, could have awarded one man the possibility of $1 trillion while millions struggled for healthcare, education, and dignity. They will read the justifications, the performance targets, the shareholder value, the indispensability of genius, and they will recognize them for what they are, the sophisticated apologetics of a system that has lost its moral bearings entirely. The approval of Elon Musk's compensation package is not an aberration. It is the apotheosis of a system that has systematically dismantled every constraint on the accumulation of private wealth, every mechanism of accountability, every vestige of shame. It is what happens when corporate governance becomes indistinguishable from feudal vassalage, when shareholders behave like subjects, when criticism is treated as heresy. It is, in short, exactly what we deserve for having tolerated, for having celebrated, for having systematically constructed an economy in which such an outcome was not merely possible, but inevitable. $1 trillion. Sleep well, shareholders. You have earned your place in the history books, right alongside those who sold indulgences, who defended divine right, who insisted that some men were simply worth more than others by virtue of their superior nature. The only question is whether future generations will remember you with pity or contempt. I suspect the latter.